Hello, I'm Alex from BSC Designer. In this tutorial, we'll talk about strategic planning with a focus on its practical implementation. I will explain our approach using this diagram that has become quite popular among users of BSC Designer. How should we start implementing strategic planning? By selecting some business frameworks or implementing a software automation tool or finding the key performance indicators. Any organization or business exists because of its stakeholders and their needs. So that's the best starting point. Business Roundtable defined five basic types of stakeholders: customers, employees, suppliers, communities, and investors. We should start with an analysis of the stakeholders, their interests, priorities, resources, and constraints. This list is just a starting point. Make sure to include the subgroups of stakeholders and the specific interests. Among the internal stakeholders of an organization, it is worth mentioning the stakeholders of strategic planning itself. Those might be senior leadership team, strategy team, and operational team. The success of strategic planning depends on buy-in from these internal stakeholders. So let's talk a little bit about their challenges. Here is what we see in practice. Challenge 1: complexity and ambiguity of the goals. Challenge 2: no alignment between the reported performance and the values as perceived by the stakeholders. Challenge 3: being proactive in adapting strategy to the future challenges. Challenge 4: having a shared knowledge center or a single source of truth about strategy. With these challenges in mind, how should we organize strategic planning? Any strategy is about satisfying the needs of the stakeholders. Ideally, we should formulate strategic ambitions using the inputs from the stakeholders and convert them into high level goals for our strategy. For example, community stakeholders are interested in mitigating climate change risks. We can use this input to formulate a high level goal called Increase Resilience for Climate Change. This approach looks nice, but in practice, it is not that straightforward. The inputs from the stakeholders are typically ambiguous and contradictory. Like in this case, the idea of climate change is not well defined. In some way, we need to manage all signals from stakeholders and formulate a meaningful strategic hypothesis or a high level goal. One of many business frameworks might help with this task. In this diagram, we group the frameworks according to their main application area. For the case of climate change, we can use a simple yet effective framework called Strategic Change Agenda. We need to analyze possible change dimensions in the context of current state versus desired future state. For example, the current states might be compromised daily operations during extreme weather events and supply chain vulnerability. And the future states might be respectively maintaining critical functions in case of extreme weather event and having alternative logistics options. We can formulate a change goal: readiness for extreme weather events. And we already have some ideas about how to start working on this goal. In the reference for this video, you'll find the link to the article where we compare the frameworks and their role in strategic planning. With the help of some frameworks and using the experience of our team, we have formulated a new high-level goal. Now, we need to implement it in some way into existing strategy. Before this, let's have a look at typical strategy workspace and how we can use it to organize a strategy. From outside, a strategy might look like a monolith, but From inside, we'll see many interconnected strategy and functional scorecards. The final structure depends on the specific organization, but typically we'll see something like this: main strategy scorecard, some scorecards for local offices, plus many functional scorecards that might focus on specific challenges such as scenario planning, digital transformation, corporate governance, cybersecurity, quality. Also, it's a good idea to have a group called Sandbox, a safe place where the strategy team can work on the prototypes of their ideas. Also, the stakeholders of strategic planning will be here to discuss strategy and execute it. Their needs vary according to their role. Senior stakeholders are interested in performance reports as well as in high level alignment between sub strategies. The strategy team is interested in mapping goals, risk scenarios, formulating initiatives, defining KPIs, and aligning operational scorecards with overall strategy. Finally, the operational team will be interested in using the strategy workspace to understand the context of the strategy and report their performance. A common challenge for all stakeholders of strategic planning is to have a single source of truth about strategy. We solve this challenge by having all the strategy and functional scorecard presented in this single workspace. Let's continue with our high level goal. How do we introduce it to this strategy workspace? We can try aligning it directly with the existing strategy scorecard, but the chance for success is low. Have a look at the challenges that we have at the bottom of the diagram. If trying to implement the goal directly into the strategy scorecard, we'll face challenge 1, complexity of the goal. Another ambiguous goal is not what our strategy needs now. A better option would be to move the goal to a strategy sandbox, a place in our workspace where the strategy team is free to transform vague high-level goals into something more specific. We have organized strategy workspace. So what's next? We need to do something with a high-level goal. We need to make it specific, quantified, and actionable. To achieve this, we'll do a value-based strategy decomposition. During the value-based decomposition, we split up the ambiguous high-level goals into the small independent sub-goals quantified by value for stakeholders. With the value-based decomposition, we address several challenges at once: the challenge of the goal's complexity and ambiguity, and the challenge of misalignment between performance measurement and value creation. Strategy decomposition is an interesting topic. It's the way to think about strategy from the first principles. There is no algorithm for a good decomposition. The results depend on the experience of your team. Actually, the mentioned business frameworks suggest their own decomposition depending on the problem area. The balances scorecard suggests grouping goals into the drivers and outcomes. Respectively, we have drivers in the learning and internal perspectives and outcomes in customer and financial perspectives. With the five forces framework, we do decomposition for the competitive environment by looking at the current competitions, customers, suppliers, future competitions, and threat of substitute. With the pestle analysis, the decomposition is done by the perspectives of external environment that form the acronym: political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. If you plan to use any business framework, look under the package to understand what kind of decomposition it suggests. As a result of the goal decomposition, we have a new strategy of functional scorecard. When the first prototype is ready, we can move it from the sandbox and align it with other scorecards in our strategy workspace. It goes without saying that in all steps of strategic planning, the learning loop should be implemented in the process. For example, during the decomposition exercise, your team should question the suggested KPIs, risk estimations, as well as the initial goals of the stakeholders. Probably there is a better way to achieve what the stakeholders need. It's time for strategy execution. Use dashboards and strategy maps to discuss strategy, report on progress with KPIs, get feedback from the stakeholders, and learn from mistakes. On this stage, a specialized strategy execution software will facilitate the process. Our tool, BSC Designer, automates the discussed approach to strategic planning. Let's see how the presented diagram matches the interface of the software. We started with the analysis of the stakeholders. In BC Designer, you can manage the list of stakeholders as well as other strategy attributes on the Strategy tab in the application settings. To reflect the interest of stakeholders in a goal, KPI, or initiative, you can assign stakeholders as an owner. When members of your strategy team log into the program, they will see the company's mission, vision, and values. On the diagram, we discussed a strategy workspace with some strategy and functional scorecards. In BC Designer, this strategy workspace is called My Scorecards. Here you can organize scorecards into groups and adjust access rights. For example, you can create a group called Strategy Sandbox, like we have on the diagram. Use the Share button to give all members of your team access to that group and other groups in your strategy workspace. The members of your strategy team can have different workflows to use the system. All stakeholders of strategic planning can have access to the scorecards. An administrator of the account can define their access rights, such as the right to view or modify a specific scorecard or indicator. The members of the strategy team will be the owners of some goals and initiatives. This system will keep them informed by sending notifications in case of specific events, such as a KPI that got the red zone or the change of initiative status. Most likely, the members of the operational team will be engaged in data input. In this case, the administrator can decide if the inputs of such users go directly into the scorecard or are held for approval. What about the senior management team? Besides having access to the strategy workspace, these stakeholders typically prefer to receive regular performance reports by email. The software can generate reports in PDF format or schedule and send it to the selected stakeholders. What type of reports can the software generate? There are some predefined report profiles that suggest different views on the strategy scorecards. It's also possible to create your own custom reports. We mentioned that having various frameworks in the business toolkit is needed to effectively define, describe, and execute strategy. From the My Scorecard section, you have access to some business frameworks as well as the templates of some functional scorecards like cybersecurity, digital transformation, or corporate governance. We talked about value-based decomposition, splitting up the goals into sub-goals, aligning KPIs, initiatives, risks, etc. In BC Designer, you can do value-based decomposition directly in a scorecard. You can create multi-level goals, add KPIs, align initiatives, risks, and much more. Another typical question our users ask is how to input performance data into their indicators. In BC Designer, users can enter data manually, import it from an Excel spreadsheet, or connect an indicator to an external database. Also, BC Designer is present on the Zapier platform, which facilitates connecting to thousands of products and services. In the strategy workspace on the diagram, the scorecards are connected to each other. How do we align the scorecards in BC Designer? Copy and paste something between the scorecards. As one of the options, the software will suggest linking to scorecards. For example, as a part of strategy for a local office, your team might conduct data security training, measuring the outcomes as percent of employees trained on data security. The cybersecurity scorecard can get this data from the scorecard of the local office. In its turn, a cybersecurity scorecard can contribute to the CEO scorecard in the form of some high level indicator, like percent of overall data security awareness. Finally, how do we discuss and execute a strategy? In the software, you have strategy maps and dashboards for this purpose. The strategy maps are automatically generated by the software using the data about your goals, KPIs, and initiatives. Another option is to create custom maps, like process maps or cause and effect maps. Performance dashboard is a powerful tool to keep the stakeholders of strategic planning informed. In BC Designer, you can have many dashboards in a scorecard and configure them according to your needs, adding classical gauge charts, risks and time diagrams, Gantt charts, listing initiatives, or indicators. How long does it take to implement strategic planning in a complex environment? Let's have a look at this Gantt chart that we shared in the article. Here you can find the three typical stages of implementation. Stage 1, testing waters, where key members of your strategy team are giving the software a try to find out if it can solve their challenges. After initial approval, our clients move to stage 2, where they build a working prototype of their strategy scorecards. More members of the strategy team are involved. In about 1 2 months, there is a good understanding of how the software can help with strategy discussion and execution. Stage 3 is when organizations scale the tested approach to other departments. The number of users that interact directly with the software increases. Depending on the readiness of the organization, it takes about 6 12 months to fully unlock the potential of disciplined strategic planning. On another diagram, we listed some typical risks of implementation and indicators that quantify those risks. For example, one of the typical risks is low engagement of the strategy team. Some members of your strategy team won't be excited about trying new ideas. A spreadsheet with the list of the performance indicators looks like a working solution, so why should we try something new? A quick answer is that the challenges that we discussed in the beginning require a more comprehensive approach to the strategy. The value based decomposition that we discussed is an important tool for implementing strategic planning in a complex environment. To quantify the mitigation plan for this risk, we suggested tracking the percent of the strategy team members who passed the strategy decomposition training. In the end, let's summarize the discussed approach and formulate a roadmap for the practical implementation of strategic planning in a complex environment. 1. Take your time to review your current approach to strategic planning. Compare it to what we discussed during this tutorial. This will facilitate buy-in from the strategy team. 2. Define the stakeholders, their interests, priorities, resources, constraints. Formulate the strategic ambitions and high level goals. 3. If needed, use one of the frameworks to better define the challenge and draft your response strategy. 4. Use the ideas of value based strategy composition to split up high level goals into sub goals quantified by the value for the stakeholders. Create a new scorecard in the strategy sandbox. 5. Align the new scorecard with the overall strategy. Use your strategy workspace for regular strategy discussions and performance reporting. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Feel free to contact the BSC Designer team with your questions.